Hi, listeners. It's Alyssa here at Stories and Spoilers, the podcast. Midnight's here, and get ready for a fun, spooky episode. We are here with Rebecca Mahoney, the author of Thrawl. This book comes out April 21st of 2026. It's got some spooky tales. It may have a vampire on campus and a radio station trying to warn people. Let's hop right into it. Welcome, Rebecca. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. I am beyond excited to talk about your book, Thrall. It was on my 2026 most anticipated books of the year. And I just want to hear more about you and what inspired you to write this story.
Absolutely. Well, I'm Rebecca Mahoney. I live in Massachusetts, and I am a huge horror fan. I live it, I breathe it, I fall asleep to it. So my first two books, which were YA, were a bit more on the contemporary fantasy side. They did have some horror elements because I can never not do that. But going into my third book, I really wanted to do a pure horror story. Um, so I don't remember exactly how I landed on vampires, but I was kind of turning them over in my head, thinking, a lot of vampire media in the past few
Mm,
years has done a bit more of a shift towards vampires as, certainly romantic interests, which we saw kick off with Twilight and then sort of continue. It certainly didn't start with Twilight. Um, and found myself kind of wondering, what kind of originally scared me about vampires? Like, what would it take to write a vampire story that kind of got under my skin again?
mm,
And that sort of took me back to the beginning, to when I forget which movie adaptation of Dracula it was. Uh,
mm,
but what really got me was Lucy Westenra and just sort of the tragic inevitability of her situation and her sort of loss of autonomy in the face of Dracula, and also sort of her being doomed a bit by the ways in which Van Helsing and the other men in her life sort of hide this from her. Like they take these
mm.
precautions without telling her what's going on. She ends up removing the garlic they hang up to protect her, and that leads to her death. So I sort of had the wanting justice for Lucy and wanting her to sort of get the opportunity to save herself on one hand. And on the other hand, I was thinking about something that stuck in my mind from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I was a devoted watcher of as a teenager. This was actually sort of this was a the first episode of season 4, and it's sort of a filler episode. It's mostly about sort of Buffy adjusting to college, but it has the conceit of these vampires targeting freshmen because they're
Mm.
more vulnerable and more isolated. Um, and I thought that could be a potentially really scary concept for a horror novel. So pushing the two of those together, the idea of Thrall kind of came into fruition.
I'm even more excited to read your book. I saw the description on Goodreads, and a friend of mine recommended it to me, and I was like, this sounds amazing. I love anything that kind of recreates the element of vampires. I feel like it is a bit of a saturated creature. I know there's a lot of stories about vampires.
Absolutely.
And for me, I'm like, there's still so much mystery there. I think there's so much for this kid become really original. Is it okay if I read the blurb on Goodreads for
These
Thrall?
two.
Okay, I can do that. All right, let's get our audiobook voices on. Okay, I gotta step it up. Okay. In Thrall, a young woman looking for a transformative college experience is bitten by a vampire and must team up with his other living victims to hunt him down. Lucy Easting has at least broken free from her grim home life and is ready to truly live. But her long awaited new beginning at Rollins University isn't what she expected. After attending her first campus party of the year, Lucy awakens the next day with a memory block and two puncture marks on her neck. Ooh. She tries to piece together what happened that night, but every lead brings her to another dead end until she receives a handwritten note from a campus radio station inviting her to call. When she does, the host's soothing voice over the line confirms her worst fear and the simplest explanation of what's happening to her: she's turning into a vampire. Lucy teams up with the show's host, who narrowly escaped an attack her sophomore year and is a beautiful Audrey companion who, while exactly Lucy's type, is likely to shoot her as to kiss her. They believe their friend with cold hands is responsible for the disappearance of several women in town, and they've been tracking him via airwaves since long before Lucy arrived. As the vampire's sway over Lucy grows and his plans become clear, she realizes she must fight for a future of her own, or she may not have any future at all. And this is coming out in 2026. It's 400 pages, and I will have everything linked below in case folks want to add it to their TBR, as you should, as you should.
Excellent audiobook voice, by the way.
Thank you. But I'm excited for this book. I have to say, radio station, vampires teaming up, maybe a little bit of romance as they
Oh, yes.
investigate. Okay, scuba gang, scuba gang. Um, and I love the reference to Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I have a relative who actually worked in the TV industry for a few years, and her coworker used to take lunch breaks at the same time so they could watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer together in their offices.
Oh, that's
So
amazing.
that's super cute. So I'm sitting here and I'm like, Buffy's for everyone. Buffy is for everyone. Speaking of Buffy, fun icebreaker question. Who was your favorite character in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and how did that influence how you wrote Thrall?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Oh my goodness. Um, well, this is a bit of a boring answer, but I do think Buffy was my favorite.
Mm.
And I think like I've been thinking about it recently, the ways in which Buffy as a character influenced Lucy. And they're very different character types. Lucy is absolutely not an ass kicker in any sense of the word. She's very smart, she's very cunning, but she is not like she's a fighter emotionally, not physically. But she is like, she's blonde, she's sort of extroverted, she's very social. And of course, in her original incarnation in Dracula, she is sort of the cannon fodder character who
Mm.
dies sort of to move the plot along, while the relatively more feminine Mina is the one who survives. Um, so I sort of loved that original idea of Buffy, which was taking the blonde girl in the alleyway who you think is going to be the first to die, and then she turns out to be a survivor. Um,
Mm.
and then in Lucy's case, it was more of sort of less being able to fight the vampire and more having to rely on her sort of her cunning and her smarts and more soft power, I guess, to find ways to survive. So,
Ooh.
and I also really love Giles. He has grown on me even more as the years have gone on. And without spoiling too much, there is sort of a nod to Giles in the book.
I absolutely love that. Because the book hasn't come out, I really am able to not ask you any spoiler questions where I usually would slip up. So this is actually quite nice. Um, I also am really curious about a little bit about that softness. I feel like in the vampire genre, it's not always safe to be as compassionate because you can get lured in by this entity, and love almost becomes manipulation. How can there be
Absolutely.
consent when they're literally feeding off of you?
Absolutely.
I was really curious about how you touch on topics such as that in your story because I feel like it's inherent to the entity.
Absolutely. And that was something that I sort of grappled with a lot going into the book because, you know, back to that original concept of how do you make a vampire scary, it
Mm.
does start with that violation of consent, violation of bodily autonomy. And it is sort of a very intimate way to attack someone. So that's something I really wanted to handle with care,
Mm.
and sort of write Lucy's dealing with that as sort of honestly and realistically as I could. And then on the other hand, something I thought about was, as especially as a queer person, I am always writing with some sympathy for the monster. So I did not want to write vampirism as something that was like wholly bad.
Mm.
And again, I have to skirt around spoilers here, but I did want to include sort of bits of that life that would be attractive to Lucy as as someone who did not have a terrible amount of control over her situation going into college. She's 23 as a freshman. She's been held back quite a bit by her family situation. So the idea of having unlimited time and having unlimited, resources at her disposal is something that is compelling to her. Um,
Mm. I get
yeah,
that. I'm also older and in college, so it's a weird track to walk. And it does sometimes feel like, is it too late? Am I taking too long? A lot of those insecurities I personally feel, so I relate even more to Lucy now, which is nice. And I will say as well, as a fellow queer person, it's really powerful to find queer authors out there who are reinventing the genre that I feel like often really is very much bury the gays. For example, in
absolutely.
Dracula, their friendship between no spoil. Can you spoil Dracula? It's been out for a very long
I
time.
think we can spoil it if it's
I
public
don't think
domain,
it's
right?
spoiled Dracula, but I'm sitting here and I'm like, I always felt like that friendship was sapphic in nature, if not queer on some spectrum. Even Dracula and what he ends up doing to, I don't think you can spoil Dracula, but there is something that Dracula does within the story to a male victim. And it's inherent that feeding isn't just for survival. There is something sexual in nature.
Absolutely.
Once again, like consent, like how can you consent to that? I love how
Exactly.
you touch on like how to make him scary again and how to make vampires spooky. But at the same time, as a queer person, it would be nice not to be killed off. It would be nice to
Absolutely.
have a love story that doesn't end in like trauma and pain. Like
Wouldn't that be nice?
that will be wonderful. I also love that you touched on the radio station because it's literally a key component of communication. They're using technology to warn people and to talk to each other. I was wondering, when you write, do you visualize everything in your mind like a movie? And if so, was it scary to write this book? Because you'd be able to see
Ooh,
everything.
absolutely. Yeah. So I don't know if you remember that sort of kind of meme, kind of quiz-ish that went around online a few years ago where people are like, some people see the apple and some people see sort of the outline of the apple. I'm sort of in the middle of that, I think. I don't think I see things with a lot of precision, but it does play out like a movie. I do have sort of the ideas of characters in my mind and how they're moving through the world. And one reason I think that radio shows show up a lot in horror I write is because that sort of idea of a voice in the dark is sort of
Mm.
inherently chill inducing to me. So there is a scene where Lucy is tuning into that radio show for the first time that did give me goosebumps when I
Ooh.
wrote it. Um, in terms of other scenes, this is where I've shot myself in the foot a bit because I consume so much horror that now it's really difficult to scare me. So I try my best to scare myself. I do it less than I used to, but thankfully I have some good friends and beta readers who will give things a bit of a scare test for me. Um,
Ooh.
I love to get, DMs on Discord like, I'm terrified. I can't go into my bathroom. Yes, I did it.
I absolutely love that. When I try to think of vampires in literature who scared me, which I will also plant that seed in your mind, like, ooh, what's a vampire in literature that like really scared you? For me, I can't help but think of the vampire. I don't remember his name, but he definitely was definitely a predator. And he was from A Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady
Yeah.
Hendrix. I that book came out a few years ago, so I don't feel afraid to mention this, but mild spoilers. There is a scene where someone's hiding in an attic and he knows she's there, like he can smell her. And the attic is super gross. There's dust, there's bugs, there's a lot of creepy stuff up there. And she literally like harms herself trying to get away from him. And he's not even
Oh,
running towards her. He's just walking leisurely. What scared me was that like he preyed on women of color and he preyed on people at night. He didn't necessarily have a care for the preference of who he wanted, someone that he thought no one would look for.
oh,
And and what scared me was that he would feed on these people who were innocent, who could not speak for themselves in marginalized communities. He purposefully did that. And for me, I was like, that is so predatory. And he's so scary in that way. And it took away all that like romanticism and all the sexiness of Twilight, or like of, the Vampire Diaries, took all that away. And it just made him like this like monster in the dark. But he's the neighbor next door,
oh.
it's really like Fright Night, similar to Fright Night.
Yeah, exactly like Fright Night.
Yes. And I'm just sitting here and I'm like, as a fellow horror lover, The scariest entities in vampiric form to me are the ones who appear sweet during the day and are predators at night, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that too. Like that concept of someone who can appear human, who can sort of walk among their prey. But when you strip them all down, they're an animal and they're viewing you like food. And there's
Mm-hmm.
something just so cold and chilling about that.
100%. Even Midnight Mass. Have you seen the
One
show?
of my favorites.
100%. That is one of the most like heartbreaking, terrifying adaptations of vampires linking to religious trauma I've ever seen. That's also been out for a while. So I'm sitting here like, do we spoil it?
Right?
I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, Midnight Mass, one of my absolute favorites. I think, Mike Flanagan, the
He's a
writer director,
genius.
yeah, he was on one, like extreme honorific when he made Midnight Mass. He was really tapping into something so deep and primal there.
It's the same meme with the piano on fire on a beach, and it's
That's exactly it.
let me throw something together. It's exactly that. I guess I'll ask you then. Did the creature from Midnight Mass a little bit influence the vampire from Thrall?
Yeah, so um the vampire from Thrall, who, oh man, I don't know that he's named, so I'll just keep calling him the vampire
Okay.
in any of my promo materials, I mean. But he does definitely have more of the Fright Night vibe where he can present
Mm,
a very pulled together exterior. But there is one moment in Midnight Mass that really stuck with me, and I think sort of has some echo in Thrall, um,
ooh.
which is there's a bit in the very early episodes. So cover your ears if you don't want this particularly scary
Spoiler
for
alert.
you.
Spoiler alert for Midnight
Spoiler warning.
Mass.
Where I think it's a guy sort of following a noise into a shed, and he sees a pair of glowing yellow eyes at like animal level, and then it stands up.
100%. I was thinking of the scene when they're in the church and it was AA and the
Yes,
guy goes back. I think he noticed he someone said something and he was um like that person's been dead for a while. And they were like,
right,
how would you know that? And he goes back into where the AA was inside the church and he sees who he thought was this young new preacher, and then the preacher like turns around and he's like, and then you see this like entity behind him who's pretty much just skin and bones and looks
right,
like a gargoyle come to life. And then the preacher is like, ooh. And then the entity literally attacks what we thought was the main character. And you see the preacher like sit in front of him, and his eyes are like glowing yellow. And he's like, you got to take the blood of Christ into you, brother. I'm like, what do you mean? He doesn't say that, but he, long story short, says, I am the old man that knew you as a child. I am now young because I took the blood of Christ into me. But it turns out the blood of Christ, this angel he speaks of, is actually a vampire. But the appearance of this actor, he had like dark black hair and like a very angular face, and like
yeah.
he looks timeless, but he has these like sad eyes.
Yeah, he's very sort of compelling. You do sort of want to confide in him.
Yeah, and he's very trusting and he has the mannerisms of this like older man, but he looks like he's in his 30s. And when he feeds, I can't describe it, but like when he turns this boy who he knew as a child, who's been struggling with substance abuse issues, he looks sad. Like he doesn't want
Right.
to, but he's like, well, I don't want you to die. Like you've already been bitten by this vampire, you're gonna bleed out. So if I turn you, you can live. And in his mind, he justifies it,
Right. He's going to give him this gift.
but he doesn't ask him if he wants the
Hmm.
gift. He just kind of does it, which is just like it wasn't consensual.
Right.
And we do end up, spoiler alert, finding out that this character only lives for like a night.
Right. Yeah. Like it's that sort of episode 5 turning point where the point of view character
Mm-hmm.
transitions in a very
Violent,
very violent and memorable scene.
a very sad. When he said, I think he says he tells like the person he's with, it's in a boat, and he tells the person he's with. It's very sad because in her perspective, she's isolated in a place alone with a man who's talking about time and death,
Right.
and she's sitting on a boat with him. And at first she felt safe, but now he's talking and she's like, But from his perspective, he's like, it's so sad because he's a vampire now. Like he's technically the
Right.
predator now. Like he could attack her, but he's just saying like, tell my parents I tried. And
Oh,
he feels so guilty and so sad. And like he has all this power, but he's obviously not going to hurt her. And he ends
right.
up like burning alive in the sun. Like he doesn't want to be this thing.
Right. Yeah, he sacrifices
He
himself.
sacrifices himself, and you just see from her perspective him burning, and from his perspective his eyes close, and he kind of passes over, and he sees someone who he hurt by accident on the other side, and it's like a form of forgiveness for him.
Ah, that's right. Oh,
It
I'm
was
going to watch Midnight
so
Mass. It's so good.
it is so good, but that was one of the most unique adaptations about vampirism I'd ever seen. Also, like what happens to someone if they were pregnant and there something happens with
Right.
a
Oh my
vampire.
God. That plot line
I
was,
never thought about that. Like how would your blood react? You know what I mean? Like that
yeah.
was heartbreaking. If anyone watches that show, please check for trigger warnings because there are none prior to the episodes. Um, but yeah, when you take the blood in Midnight Mass in this show, like there's someone who's in a wheelchair who ends up being able to stand. There's someone who was pregnant at the time who takes the blood, not knowing that. There's people who have back issues. There's a lot that goes on in this small town.
Right.
The isolation is similar to the isolation on a campus if you think about it.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's sort of something I had in my mind as well. And
Yeah.
the way that Midnight Mass sort of deals with the religion angle is so graceful to me. So I know when I
Mm.
was approaching Thrall, that was something that I completely wanted to avoid because it's tricky because if you're going to include sort of the crucifix as the repellent, you do have to sort of say like, okay, well, Christianity is the one true religion. So in
Mm.
Thrall, in Thrall, part of the lore is that that's Catholic Church propaganda essentially, and
Ooh.
crucifixes actually don't do anything against the Catholics.
What when you touch on that, what really blew my mind was that you see in Interview with a Vampire as well, rest in peace, Anne Rice, but you see there's a vampire. Can you spoil Interview with a Vampire? Oh my
Right?
god. I'm going
The
down
new
the list
show,
and
right?
I'm like, you can't spoil these things. But in Interview with the Vampire in the television show adaptation, the most recent one, there is an attack in a church, and there's a character, someone prays at him, like someone says something to him in like a religious context. He's very dramatic, and he ends up like finishing the religious quote, and he's like, I used to say that quote all the time. It doesn't actually affect him, and he's like, I know that quote, and it does not affect me. I'm gonna walk through these biblical gates, bam, bam, with my gay vampiric ass. He walks through those biblical gates, and he's like, "Yeah, so I'm here for Louis," and he ends up just like destroying everything. And then you have the same thing in Sinners.
Right, that's
Someone
right.
tries to
We're in a
pray.
renaissance right now.
Yes, we're literally in a vampiric religious renaissance because someone tries to pray while a vampire is attacking them, and the vampire finishes this quote, which most Catholics would know, but he finishes this prayer that's pretty well known, and he's like, "This used to bring me peace." And he talks about like how they came to his land and they made him memorize this prayer way back when.
Yeah, and oh,
Oh,
that was so good. Just like as that character was an Irishman who had like existed since before
mm-hmm.
colonization by the Catholics.
Yep.
It's what like speaking of things everybody should watch, Interview with the Vampire and Sinners.
Interview with the Vampire, Sinners, Buffy, Dracula. If you think about all of these films as well, there is a connotation to some extent of queerness.
Hmm.
Hear me out. And I think you could see it as well. Obviously, in Buffy, there's lots of elements of queerness. You definitely get queerness in Dracula between the female friendships, as well as Dracula and his nature of wanting to feed, not really differentiating between gender. In Sinners, I think you also have that connotation between the vampire in that story and his hunger and his requirement of this young boy to transfer him to a different world through his powers. He
Absolutely.
wants to use him. It's not romantic in any way, but in a lot of ways, I'm sitting here and I'm like, he's hunting. He doesn't
Right.
care who it is. So there's also elements of race, but in all of those connotations, religion pops up in every single one of those connections to vampirism. Like Buffy, multiple episodes wears across it. Multiple episodes, like holy water is going to protect them. What if that
Right.
doesn't work? And that's the scary part. Like, what if all these things that the movies and shows told you about don't work? In Midnight
Right?
Mass, the vampire didn't give a damn. He was like, I'm
Right.
a
When you
useless
think about it,
creature.
it feels very arbitrary. Like, oh, like this is supposed to protect me.
100%. This is supposed to protect me. And the power of belief. And the same thing with the radio station. When I think about it, if I hear something on the news or you hear something on the radio station, you see something on social media, a lot of people are very quick to believe because well, they're like, oh, but it's on this massive platform. It wouldn't have gone out if it wasn't legitimate.
Hmm.
And if there was vampires and someone said, if you see this, you do this, you'll be protected. What if you're wrong? And that makes it even scarier. Like, what if the warnings
Absolutely.
don't work? And on a college campus, if you don't have a car and you're away from home, how are you getting away?
Right. And I based this particular college campus on Sewanee University of the South in Tennessee. I did a writing workshop there when I was in high school, and I'd always
Mm.
lived in pretty populated places. So it kind of blew my mind. It's on the Cumberland Plateau, which is in the Appalachian Mountains. So driving up to like fairly high elevation to the, for me, a sea dweller, to the middle of nowhere. I'd never seen nights quite as dark as that. And that's
Oh.
something that stuck with me for so many years, that kind
Oh.
of isolation.
I'm so excited. I love anything with vampires in unique settings where they would like thrive. Alaska,
Exactly.
in the darkness, deep in the woods with like heavy tree fall where there's lots of like shadows.
Hmm.
I absolutely love that. Like even like underground situations. Like have you ever heard of like spelunking? Where
Hmm.
people like they go into the cracks of the ocean. It's one of my worst fears. In my head, I'm like, wouldn't a vampire like thrive like in a in a,
Right,
a dark
exactly.
cavernous area? Well, yes.
And I think of college campuses in the same breath in a way, because there's so many weird subterranean areas to a college campus, and a lot of them
Ooh,
have steam tunnels connecting the various buildings, which is
I
something that
love
shows up really
that.
well.
No, I absolutely adore that. We also do that in education and Malice with ST Gibson, where a lot of older colleges do have underground areas, like even like archives and libraries. I had an
Right.
archive at my library, and it was like under the second floor. It was physically colder, and it was technically underground, so no
Yeah.
windows.
My college library was a lot like that too. It had, I think, one or two floors above ground and then several below ground. So
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of how I think of a college library, something very subterranean and
Spooky, spooky.
dark. And
I love this. I just want you to write more like creature features, like
I would be happy to do that for the rest of my life.
it's my Christmas wish. I'm sitting here and I'm like, commit to three more creature features. I wanted to ask, what was your favorite part of writing Thrall, and what do you want readers to know about
Ooh, good question.
it?
Um,
Hmm.
well, like, I think a big part of it was sort of getting to really throw myself into horror in a different way. Like,
Mm.
I feel like I I would compare it to this reference is going to date me for sure, but like when I was a kid, I would watch Legends of the Hidden Temple on
Mm.
Nickelodeon, which is like a children's game show, and be like, oh, I could do this. Like getting to write a horror novel is a bit like like if I was 8 years old and got to go on Legends of the Hidden Temple. Like I'm getting to play in a playground that I've watched for so many years. So
Mm.
just getting to really dig my hands into those tropes and figure out what worked for me was really fun. But then also the romance angle was something I really enjoyed, between Lucy and this character Mila, who is sort of her protector, but is also the person who, if Lucy becomes a vampire or otherwise endangers the group, is going to be tasked with killing her. Um, so
Mm.
they have a very awkward relationship, understandably. Um, but romance is a thing I haven't actually written a lot. Like most of my books until now have been mostly plot driven with like occasionally a side romance. So it was really good to dig into that and to sort of, like we were talking about earlier, explore a bit more of the intimate and more consensual sort of aspects to the physicality of being a vampire. Um, and this is where it became particularly good to be writing an adult book and not a young adult book like I was writing before.
I think that there's something about, as the great Rihanna said, we found love in a place like this, in a
So
situation
true.
we found love literally in a place like this. How possible? A lot of people fall in love in some of the most stressful situations and in some really dark times. People somehow have found time to create art, books, love stories, in an entire community in really bad situations. So it's not mind blowing the concept that someone would fall in love while trying to track down a predatory vampire.
Exactly. And especially where, the rest of your body and your emotions aren't necessarily at your control. Falling in love with a beautiful woman is a great way to take control.
Exactly. I was sitting here and I was like, 1 + 1 = gay. And the only way, what's the answer? What could possibly resolve the situation?
It's always gay.
Well, fall in love with the person who will totally take you out if necessary.
Exactly.
It's definitely giving like the tension from Xena Warrior Princess, where
Uh,
it's like, stand behind me, I got you. You know,
exactly.
we all felt that tingle in our brains. We were like, whoa.
That was a moment in all of our lives.
No, my dad introduced me to Xena, the warrior princess, when I was a kid. He was like, "This is a very important show, and you need to watch it." And I was like, little did he know, I was like, "You are creating a lesbian."
Right. Like it's very important, not in all the ways that you know at the moment.
Him, I will show you strong women. I'm like, I will show you crushes galore. Yes, Xena, the warrior princess, definitely like unlocked something in my mind. I'm like, why does she have so many muscles and beautiful icy blue eyes, and why is her hair so shiny and glorious? Why?
Lucy Lawless, thank you.
Stunning, brilliant, gorgeous, 10 out of 10. I can't understand. She
Women.
would be a great like professor on your campus. Women's studies. Mm-mm.
Mm,
I feel like she would know how to slay this vampire. I feel like she would
absolutely.
have the answers.
Like, you know,
10%.
Thrall. Thrall if Lucy Lawless was working on campus.
Oh my gosh, that just it keeps bringing me back to the vampire from In Education and Malice, because the vampire in that story is a professor on campus. And the relationship there, which is there's queerness everywhere in that story, but there's something
Absolutely.
about like there's a scene where I was genuinely scared because she's this supposed to be beautiful woman standing in the dark in a trench coat, angry because this young woman who she is like is supposed to be like her pupil, and what you're not sure is this young woman gonna become a vampire, or does she truly see her as an academic pupil?
Hmm.
That sire relationship, I've seen it written and shown on television and movies as being romantic, and I've seen it more like as a parental figure. um so in my head, it's one of those things where like there was a scene in that book where the professor, who we know is a vampire, is standing outside in the dark watching Carmilla, who at this point was was a human, um and her love interest, who was like her academic rival. She's watching these two girls kiss in the dark, and she's angry because she's like, I want you to be where I am, you're not where I put you, like very like treating her like an object.
Right, yeah.
And it wasn't in my head, I'm like, is the professor in love with her, or is this like a control problem? And in my head I was like, that's the scary part of vampires, is the line is very blurry about like ownership versus love. Like I keep coming back to like Haunting of Bly Manor, the famous line where
Hmm.
she's like, you can't love is not possession, you can't possess
Right.
someone, that's not love, you know. Same thing with vampires, possession, to claim, to bite, to turn, is very possessive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
And
doesn't feel like love, it feels like ownership, like an object, not a person.
right. Oh, and I love S.T. Gibson. And I think this is something that really gets played with really interestingly and well in Interview with the Vampire as well. That these vampires are so completely disconnected from the human experience, and how can they really be connected when humans are their food?
Mm-hmm.
That they sort of can't possibly view, relationships or morality the same way that we do. And
I
that's like
totally get that.
so scary and it's so compelling.
It's exactly like Lestat when he was standing in the dark watching Louis, like with that guy in the show. And he's like,
Uh,
"Your hearts were
I heard your
dancing,"
heart's dancing.
and I love how he was like at home in the original, like in the episode, and he's at home in his coffin, and Louis is like were you outside? And Lestat was like, no, I've been home the whole time. I'm like, you're literally crazy. Like the way you're insane. He was in the dark. He was totally watching, but because Louis is so old, as he's doing the interview, his memory is like kind of like warped. As he tells the story, it's like, was it raining? Was it not?
Ugh,
Was Louis, did you know he was there and you did the things, or did you truly not know? Like from an outside perspective, um, it was really, it messed with my mind because I was like, well, Louis is mentally very old. And I assume these are some really traumatic memories. Maybe he doesn't remember these things super clearly because even as a vampire, like I'm sure he experiences trauma. I'm sure he like represses stuff. Even though he's incredibly old, this love story, if you could even call it that, some people wouldn't, because it's so toxic. I was like, but it's queer representation. But I'm all at the same
right,
time, I'm like, but it's so toxic. Like Lestat treats him like trash.
right. But it is just sort of the pinnacle
Oh
of gothic horror. Like,
yes.
like
Let
you
the
two are
story
terrible for
seduce
each
you
other, and I
as
can't
it
stop watching
seduced
it.
me. Like, ooh, like Louise' voice, like as even as this guy says, like every relationship Louis has in the story is to some extent toxic,
Hmm.
even if it's not romantic. Armand, in some ways, is very controlling and
Right.
manipulative,
Like potentially more so.
potentially more so. And the way that he's revealed in the show versus the way he's revealed in the book, when I was learning more about Thrall, and as I was reading the description, I couldn't help but think like this has Armand written all over it. In my head, I was like, yeah, like waiting in the darkness, like you know what I mean? Like, yeah, like it's giving Armand, like it's giving the
Right.
black bundle like baddie that we all know, you know? He's supposed to be sexy and alluring and like I don't know, like one of those like entities that's always like he is a shadow.
Right.
I
And
don't know,
he,
spooky.
oh yeah, and Armand is such a like fascinating character because he projects such vulnerability too. And that sort of draws you in and makes you underestimate him.
I love the way that he was shown in the show as well because initially you don't. I was kind of like waiting for when he would appear. So when he does appear, I was like, oh, like you're older than Lestat and you're obviously older than Louis. I was expecting like a bigger than life introduction. It was cool that
Right.
he was always there. I was like,
Right.
ooh,
And
I love
Assad
it.
Zaman is just like a beautiful bird. Like he's so like delicate and elegant and
100%. The actor who plays him is stunning.
so
And
beautiful.
physically, yes, 100%. But I guess I was like, I was so used to, I grew up on Interview with the Vampire, the movie.
Right,
That,
with the Antonio Banderas.
yeah, now kiss. I was like, oh. I was, another movie, my mom was like, this is so important. It's going to make you love like the fantasy world. But for me, I was like, why is no one hugging or in love? I was like,
Right, like
everyone's obviously in love.
they're married. No one's mentioning this.
100%. I'm like, so they're raising a little girl together, and Louis is constantly talking about Lestat. It's giving love. But now, obviously, when you're older and you've been in a relationship, you're like, oh no, this is
Right.
so bad. But it just makes me more excited to learn about how you developed a vampire enthrall. Because in my head, I'm like, after you grow up on so much media, and you have the opportunity to craft your own vampire, what does, oh, that's a good question. What makes a good vampire for you?
Ooh, yeah. And there are, again, without getting too much into it, there are perhaps a couple different vampires that you might see in Thrall. Um,
Ooh,
so I sort of tried to explore a couple different um, facets of it, like the the vampire who attacks Lucy.
mm,
I'm like, how do I not give too much away? Um, he is a person of various privileges.
interesting.
And that sort of gets magnified in his eternal life and
Mm,
really informs a lot of the ways he moves as an immortal. Um, so
I
I,
love that.
right? So he, that sort of feeds into some of the
Entitlement.
Entitlement for sure. I almost called it dehumanization, but it doesn't matter if they're human to him because
You're all
that's
food. And his we're
exactly
it's like we're in a Publix. He's like, I
right.
see a sub. Her name's
It is
Brittany.
like you're in
So
a Publix.
yeah, I'm like, we are not all pieces of meat. He's like, I beg to differ. It's a very
Right.
I'm like, oh, I'm curious. Have you seen the Vampire Diaries by any
I
chance?
have seen the Vampire Diaries.
I was curious. Are there any entities in your story that are similar to Niklaus or maybe Elijah?
Yes, the other vampires I'm thinking of are much older, and that was something that was really fun to play with because you think
Ooh.
like, you know, do you still like have desires at that age? Do you still have hunger?
Hmm.
The way a younger vampire might. How do you view the world? How do you view humanity? And
Ooh.
that ends up being something that's very, again, kind of alien and very not easily mappable to human morality. Um, but then on the other hand, they're also maybe a bit more curious than a younger, more hungry vampire might be.
Ooh.
So these are vampires that Lucy actually might get a bit more traction with in terms of asking for help.
I love that. My last like vampire reference in the media that I want to ask you about that maybe it influenced if you've seen it. There's a show called A Discovery of Witches.
Ooh, that one I haven't watched, but I've heard such good things.
All I want to say is that there's a vampiric entity in the show that as I was like reading the description of Thrall, I was like, I wonder if this entity could be slightly influenced. He's very gothic.
Ooh.
But keeps someone he keeps part of someone inside of a box and he uses this part of this person for his own bad deeds. Very
Ah.
spooky, and when he feeds he sees the memories of whoever he's feeding on, including paranormal entities.
Oh.
So he lives in Vienna and he's old and he's evil and he's very beautiful coiffed hair. And there's a lot of vampires in the story that are like, I don't know. Like I never forget they're partially like animals. Even in the first episode, there is a vampire entity who's supposed to be a romantic lead. He's played by a very graceful, beautiful man. But he there's a point in the story where someone walks past him, and at first it was like romantic, but then he's holding on to this person's like this person dropped a sweater, and he grabs the sweater and he sniffs it, and
Oh.
it's in the dark, and he grabs her sweater, it dropped, and she goes to turn around. He's like, walk away super slowly and do not turn around. And she starts walking away, and before the episode ends, she turns around, and then it ends. You don't find out what happens. You have to assume she lives, but literally the actor, I don't know how he did it. His pupils like got bigger,
Ooh.
and he like sucked in, like he breathed in so hard his like cheeks hollowed, and he looked like skeletal, and he was like, yeah, like he was like, don't, he was really watching her in the dark. She was rowing and he could hear her breath and her heartbeat, and he was just like standing there, and she was like, what are you gonna do, kill me? You can't kill me. And he was like, I have no interest in that. He was like, but the moment she walked past him, he was like, why not? So it was when you watch it, I just hope you have this image in your mind. Why not? You know. But it was one of the most interesting adaptations of a vampire love story I've ever seen, because he's like, kind of want to eat her, but he's also like,
Right.
kind of love her. It's he switches often.
Oh, I love that.
It's
Like
good.
if Twilight had actually been a bit more of a gothic horror, it might have been like that. Like if I
Yes.
actually believed that Edward could have eaten her.
100%. I never felt like I would eat you like a shish kebab. Like it never gave that
Right.
vibe. But the only character who I ever felt like was on the brink of like consuming someone at every moment besides Jasper was like Rosalie. She was the only
That's
one
true.
who I was like, yeah, like I could see you like tripping and like biting someone's arm off. Like I could see that. I could
Right,
totally see
exactly.
that.
Yeah, otherwise that family was pretty soft and gentle.
I have to say, we're kind of like vegetarians. I'm sitting here like, I should definitely speak with more respect, as my girlfriend's one of her favorite movies, and Robert Pattinson is my competition. Ever since the name was like, your competition's on the phone. Robert Pattinson is definitely my competition. Sorry, my love, if you're listening, but it's true. She loves that man. My competition is a pale British man who's married and has a kid, but
Right.
we leave that alone. We leave that alone. Um, I guess I just want to say, what do you want readers to know about Thrall? And thank you for all the references to vampires as we like leave it mysterious because your vampire is going to be very unique. But I love knowing that we've got a little bit of the Vampire Diaries. We've got some Dracula in there. We've got Fright Night. So I'm excited to see like what you do with vampires.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I guess what I would want people to know going into Thrall, especially since I have a lot of friends who are a little more like horror cautious, who are like, should I read this or not? I'm like, well, I can give you sort of the list of triggers in the book. It's ultimately up to you. But I think my guiding principle with horror is always that I want to find catharsis. Like I'm a very anxious person in my everyday life, and horror
Mm.
for me is sort of a way to sort of experience fear in a controlled environment and get through it. Um, and certainly I don't want my characters to have an easy time of it, but I want to resolve the feelings that I introduce.
Mm.
So I will take good care of you. I will scare you in the process, but I will take good care of you.
You hold on to my hand.
Exactly.
I will 100% trust you. Step into the darkness. I'm sure we will survive to the end, maybe.
We might be changed, but we'll get there.
We're gonna get there. It's the same thing with The Hobbit, where it's like, can you promise I'll get home safe? No.
Right,
No.
exactly.
But you'll
You
have a
might come home a
wonderful
different
story.
person, but
100%. Your book comes out April 21st, 2026. I'm going to link the pre-ordered link below in the show notes, as well as the Goodreads link so everyone can find you and they can find you on social media. But please feel free to tell everyone what your Instagram name is and yeah, and just kind of close out.
thank you so much. And yeah, I'm Rebecca Mahoney. On Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram, just about everywhere you can find me. I am Cafe Cliche, no spaces.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Everyone who listens, please like and do a little subscription on YouTube. Follow if you're on Spotify. Leave a nice little rating and check out Thrall. Okay, it's gonna be so good. Thrall by Rebecca Mahoney. It comes out in April 21st, 2026. Have an absolutely wonderful day and thank you for listening.